My mother-in-law didn't ask. She announced it. "We're borrowing your vacation fund for our anniversary." She said it the way someone announces dessert, like the decision had already been made and my job was to smile and pass the plates. For a second, I honestly thought I'd misheard her. We were sitting at their dining table, the heavy oak one that still has faint scratches from when my husband was a kid, and they pretended not to notice. The kind of table that makes you sit straighter without realizing it. Her place settings were immaculate, the candles lit even though it was early evening, and the whole scene had that curated feeling she loves. Like life is a magazine spread and everyone else is just a prop. "I'm sorry?" I said, careful. Not soft, careful. My father-in-law chuckled like I was being cute. My husband shifted beside me, a small movement, knee brushing mine under the table. I felt it as a warning. My mother-in-law smiled and dabbed her mouth with her napkin, still in control of her tone. "For our 40th, she said. "We found this resort in Italy. It's a once-in-a-lifetime thing. Flights are ridiculous right now, so we'll need to use your vacation savings. Just temporarily." Temporarily. That word is how people steal with a clean conscience. I stared at her for a second longer than socially polite. I was trying to figure out if she truly didn't realize how insane that sounded, or if she realized and didn't care. "How much are you talking about?" I asked. "All of it," my father-in-law said, as if he were answering what time it was. "It's just sitting there. Just sitting there." I felt something cold slide into place in my chest, the way it does when a pattern finally reveals itself so clearly you can't unsee it. My husband's fork paused, his jaw tightened just a little. He didn't look at me. He looked at his plate. I looked at my father-in-law. "You know how much it is?" My mother-in-law waved a hand like that detail didn't matter. "Around 18, right? You've been so responsible. We're proud of you. You always were the planner." My throat went tight. Because yes, it was around 18,000. And I had never told her that number. I hadn't told anyone, not even my own mother, because numbers get weird in families. They become permission. They become suggestion. They become entitlement. I had told my husband because he's my husband. I trusted that. Or I thought I did. I turned my head slightly. "Did you tell them how much it was?" My husband's eyes flicked to mine for a second. "I mentioned it," he said, quiet. "Not like I didn't say they could take it." Mentioned it. In his family, mentioning is the same as putting it on a buffet table with a serving spoon. My mother-in-law leaned forward, lowering her voice as if she were being intimate. "We assumed you'd want to help," she said. "It's our 40th. You'll have your vacation later. You're young, sweetheart. You can travel any time." Sweetheart. That was new. She only uses pet names when she's about to press something through resistance. It's her way of making me feel small without ever raising her voice. My father-in-law nodded. "We raised him," he added. "We sacrificed. We're not asking for charity, it's a loan. Loan. Loans have terms, loans have dates, loans have contracts, loans have accountability. This wasn't a loan. This was a declaration." I took a slow breath and looked down at my plate, not because I was intimidated, but because I needed to anchor myself. My hands were steady. My heartbeat wasn't racing. It was like some part of me had stepped back and started taking notes. I've been with my husband for 7 years, married for 3. And in those 7 years, I have watched the same play happen again and again, just in different costumes. It starts with an assumption. Then it becomes a request disguised as a statement. Then it turns into guilt if you hesitate. Then it becomes anger if you say no. The first time it happened, it was small. His mom borrowed our Costco card because she forgot hers. Then she kept it for months and acted offended when I asked for it back. Like I had accused her of theft instead of asking for my own property. Later, it was money. Not huge. A couple hundred here, a few hundred there. Always for something urgent. Always for something family. Always paid back eventually, but late, and only after it became awkward enough that my husband would rather pay it himself than remind them again. Then it was information. What I made at work, what he made, what our mortgage was, how much we had saved. His mom would ask like she was curious, like she was proud, like she was invested, and my husband would answer like it was normal, because for him, it is normal. Because he grew up in a house where privacy was treated like secrecy, and secrecy was treated like betrayal. Meanwhile, I grew up in a house where we didn't talk about money unless it was necessary, and we didn't assume access to other people's plans just because we shared DNA. So I built that vacation fund quietly, in a separate account, because it was the only way to protect it from the gravitational pull of family needs. Japan, 2 weeks. Not a luxury trip to show off, not a revenge trip. A dream I'd had since I was a teenager, sitting on my bedroom floor watching documentaries with subtitles, promising myself one day I'd stand in those streets and feel it for real. My husband liked the idea too. He'd gotten excited about the food and the temples and the bullet trains. He'd talked about it in this soft, hopeful way that made me believe it was ours. And now his mother was announcing she would take it. Not ask, take. I looked up at her again. When would you need it? Soon, she said, relieved, like she'd assumed I was already coming around. Within the week. We put a deposit down, but the suite won't hold. You know how these places are. Suite? Of course. Not a modest anniversary. Not a weekend away. A suite in Italy. My father-in-law poured himself more wine. We'll pay it back, he said. Once things settle. Once things settle is another way people say never. My husband finally spoke again, voice careful. They'll pay it back, babe. Babe. He only calls me that in front of them when he's trying to keep the room calm. I turned to him. Did you know they were planning this? He swallowed. No. I watched his face for a second. He wasn't lying. Not fully. He hadn't known they were going to announce it like this. But he had known they were capable of it. He'd just never believed they would. And that meant he had been living in denial. His mother's smile tightened at the edges. You're making this awkward, she said, the warmth draining slightly. We didn't think this would be a problem. We thought you'd understand. We've done so much for you two. There it was. The invoice. It always comes out when the door doesn't open easily. I set my fork down carefully. The sound was small, but in the sudden quiet it felt loud. I need to be very clear, I said, keeping my voice calm, not sweet, not apologetic, calm. You don't get to announce that you're borrowing our savings. My mother-in-law blinked as if I'd spoken a foreign language. My father-in-law's eyebrows lifted. Borrowing, he corrected, like the word itself would soften the reality. My husband's knee pressed into mine again under the table. A silent plea. I ignored it. Because if I didn't say it now, I would be saying it for the next 10 years, in smaller ways, in more compromises, until the resentment built into something that would poison my marriage. My mother-in-law tilted her head. So you're saying no? I held her gaze, and for the first time, instead of feeling panic or guilt, I felt clarity. Because the truth was simple. The money wasn't there. It hadn't been for weeks. Not because I'd spent it. Not because I was reckless, because I had learned. I looked at my husband once more, then back at her. Actually, I said, there's something you should know. My husband frowned. What? I kept my tone even. The vacation fund is already gone. My mother-in-law stared at me, her smile freezing in place like a mask. Gone? She repeated. Yes, I said. And in that moment, I watched her go from confident to calculating. Because if the money was gone, the assumption of access was gone with it. And she wasn't used to hearing a door close. For a second, nobody moved. My mother-in-law's smile didn't drop immediately. It just stiffened. Like she was waiting for the punchline. Gone where? She asked finally. Transferred, I said. To what? My father-in-law demanded. I didn't answer right away. I looked at my husband instead. He looked confused. Not angry yet, just confused. You moved it? He asked quietly. Yes. When? His voice had an edge now. 3 weeks ago. My mother-in-law let out a short, incredulous laugh. Without telling us? I held her gaze. Yes, she blinked. Without telling him? That one was aimed like a dart. My husband looked at me and I saw it. That flicker of betrayal. Not because I had taken something from him, but because I had made a decision he wasn't part of. And that's the part that hurt. I didn't think it was urgent to discuss. I said carefully. It's still our money. Apparently not, my father-in-law muttered. I turned to him slowly. It is. It's just not accessible the way you assumed. My mother-in-law's voice lost its sweetness completely. Accessible? She repeated. We are not strangers. I didn't say you were. Then why are you acting like we tried to rob you? She snapped. Because you did. Not legally, not with a weapon, but with entitlement, with history, with emotional leverage. My husband leaned forward, palms flat on the table. Can you just explain where it went? He asked me. I exhaled slowly. I moved it into an account that requires 2 signatures to withdraw from. Silence. His eyebrows lifted. 2 signatures? Yes. Whose? Mine and a financial advisor. My mother-in-law's chair scraped against the floor. You locked it? I protected it. From who? She shot back. I didn't answer immediately. Because that question was the entire story. From this, from assumptions, from pressure dressed up as family bonding, from the way every boundary becomes an insult in this house. My father-in-law stared at me like I had just insulted their entire lineage. You think we'd steal from you? No, I said evenly. I think you feel entitled to what isn't yours. My husband flinched. That landed harder than I expected. You're twisting this, my mother-in-law said sharply. We were borrowing. You didn't ask. We're asking now. No, I said. You're reacting. Her eyes narrowed. You knew we would need it. There it was. Need. I folded my hands in my lap to keep them still. I knew you might try. My husband's head snapped toward me. Try? Yes. You expected this? He asked. Yes. The word felt heavy but solid. His jaw tightened. Why? Because I've been paying attention. Because every time we save, someone needs something. Because you tell them everything. Because they never hear no the first time. But I didn't say all of that at once. Instead, I said, because patterns repeat. My mother-in-law's voice dropped into something colder. You're making us villains. No, I said quietly. You're making yourselves creditors. My father-in-law laughed once, sharp. We raised him. And I married him, I replied. That doesn't make you shareholders. The word shareholders hit harder than I intended. My husband rubbed his temples. This is getting ridiculous. Yes, I said, looking at him now. It is. You should have talked to me before moving it. I tried. When? When your mom asked you how much we had saved. When your dad joked that we'd better keep it liquid. When your mom said, you don't need all that sitting around. He went quiet, because he remembered. I told you it made me uncomfortable, I continued. You said they didn't mean anything by it. They didn't, he insisted weakly. They did. The table felt smaller now, tighter. My mother-in-law leaned forward again, her composure thinning. So what now? We just cancel our anniversary? That's not my decision, I said. But it's your fault, she replied instantly. There it was, fault. If they don't get what they want, someone must be to blame. I looked at her for a long second. No, I said softly. It's the consequence of assuming access. Her face flushed. You're being selfish. That word again. It's fascinating how selfish only ever applies when a woman keeps something she built. I saved that money, I said, for something we planned. You can plan again, she shot back. And you can budget differently, I replied. My father-in-law stood abruptly. This is unbelievable. No, I said. This is overdue. My husband looked at me like he didn't recognize me for a second. And maybe he didn't, because I wasn't the woman who let small things slide anymore. I wasn't the woman who smiled and said, it's fine when it wasn't. My mother-in-law's voice shifted again, now trembling slightly with indignation. After everything we've done for you. There it is, I said quietly. What? The invoice. Her lips parted. You keep bringing up sacrifice like it earns interest. The room went still. You are unbelievable, she whispered. No, I said, my voice steady. I'm done being available. My husband looked between us, panic rising now. Can we just calm down? He said. We'll figure something out. We already did, I replied. He stared at me. What does that mean? It means the money isn't moving. My mother-in-law's face hardened completely now. So you're choosing this hill? I'm choosing autonomy. She laughed bitterly. You think this is about autonomy? This is about gratitude. No, I said. Gratitude isn't a withdrawal slip. My father-in-law grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair. You've changed, he said. Maybe I had. Maybe I finally stopped shrinking to fit into someone else's expectations. My husband stood too, clearly overwhelmed. We'll talk about this later, he said quickly. Yes, I replied. We would. Because this wasn't just about his parents. This was about us. As we walked to the car, the air felt heavier than it had when we arrived. He didn't speak at first, neither did I. Finally, he said, You should have told me. I looked out the window at the dark streetlights. I should have, I admitted. Then why didn't you? Because I needed to know if I could trust you with a boundary. But what I said was softer. Because I didn't know if you'd protect it. The silence after that was deeper than the one at the table, and I realized something in that moment. The money wasn't the real test. The real test had just begun. We didn't make it halfway home before his phone started buzzing. Group chat, his family's group chat, the one with cousins, aunts, his sister, random emojis, and his mother's passive-aggressive, inspirational quotes. He glanced at the screen, then locked it. What? I asked. Nothing. Show me. He hesitated. That hesitation told me everything before I even saw the messages. He handed me the phone. His mother had posted, Sometimes the hardest part of parenting is realizing your children forget the sacrifices you made, followed by a broken heart emoji. His aunt replied almost instantly, Is everything okay? Then his sister, Wait, what happened? Then his mother again, Just disappointed. 40 years of marriage deserves celebration. Apparently, that's too much to ask. No names, no direct accusation, just implication, public implication. I handed the phone back slowly. She's triangulating, I said. She's venting, he corrected automatically. About our money. He ran a hand over his face. You didn't have to blindside everyone. I didn't blindside anyone. You moved it without telling me. There it was, the fracture. Not anger at them, anger at me. I moved it because I knew this would happen, I said quietly. You assumed the worst. I anticipated the pattern. He exhaled sharply. They're not criminals. I never said they were. But you treated them like they are. No, I said. I treated them like people who don't respect boundaries. The car filled with silence again. Then his phone buzzed. This time it was his sister. He answered on speaker without thinking. Hey, he said. What is going on? She demanded. Mom is crying. Of course she is. She's not crying, I said calmly. She is, his sister insisted. She said you refused to help with their anniversary, that you locked your money away. There it was. The narrative shift. Not we announced access. Not we assumed. Refused to help. Locked your money away. She announced she was taking it, I said evenly. It was a loan, his sister snapped. Was it discussed with us beforehand? I asked. Silence. Then softer. Mom said you overreacted. Of course she did. She didn't ask, I repeated. You could have just said no. I did. And that wasn't enough? No, I said. It wasn't. My husband cut in. Can we not do this right now? His sister sighed. You're embarrassing them. Embarrassing. That word always appears when someone powerful gets challenged. They embarrassed themselves, I said. There was a long pause. Then his sister said something that made everything click. They already put the rest on a credit card. My husband stiffened. What? They assumed you'd transfer the savings this week, she continued. They booked the suite. Of course they did. They didn't just assume access. They pre-spent it. My husband's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. They what? He said again. They thought you'd come through. You always do. That sentence didn't just land on him. It hit him. You always do. Because he always had. Because growing up in that house meant solving their problems quietly to keep the peace. I felt something settle inside me. This wasn't about celebration. This was about image. They had already committed to a lifestyle they couldn't afford, banking on us to cover the gap. She should have asked, my husband muttered. She thought she didn't have to, his sister replied. There it was. Entitlement isn't loud when it's comfortable. It's casual, assumed, inherited. We hung up. He drove the rest of the way home in silence. When we got inside, he didn't take off his jacket. He just stood there in the entryway like the house felt unfamiliar. They already put it on a credit card, he said finally. I know. You knew? I suspected. He stared at me. That's why you moved it? Yes. Why didn't you tell me that? Because if I told you, you would have warned them. He didn't answer, because he would have. I needed to see if you'd hold the line, I said softly. His expression shifted from anger to something else. Confusion, betrayal, and underneath it, realization. You didn't trust me, he said. I didn't trust the system you grew up in. He sat down heavily on the couch. I didn't think they'd go that far. I did. He looked up at me. Why? Because I watch. Because your mom tests boundaries the way other people test recipes. Because every small IS turns into a bigger expectation. But I didn't say it cruelly. I said, because they've never heard no without escalating. His phone buzzed again. This time it was his mother directly. He didn't answer. The message preview showed just enough. I can't believe you'd let her humiliate us like this. There it was. Not, we're sorry. Not, we miscalculated. Humiliated. He sank back into the couch. They think you embarrassed them, he said. I think they embarrassed themselves. He didn't argue that. Instead, he said, they can't afford that suite. I know. And now they'll have debt. Yes. And they think that's our fault. Yes. The silence between us wasn't hostile anymore. It was heavy with truth. They expected me to fix it, he said quietly. Yes. And you expected me to let them. No, I said gently. I expected you to choose. That hung in the air. Choose. Not between me and them. Between adulthood and obligation. Between partnership and default loyalty. He looked down at his hands. I hate this, he whispered. I know. But I don't hate you, I added. He looked up, surprised. I hate that they assumed access, I continued. I hate that you didn't see it coming. I hate that I felt like I had to protect us alone. His jaw tightened. You didn't protect us alone. I moved the money alone. He swallowed. That hurt. I know. Another buzz, another message from his mom, then one from his dad, then the group chat again. The pressure wasn't stopping. It was intensifying. Because now there was financial damage. And when entitlement meets consequence, it gets louder. He stood up slowly. I need to go over there, he said. I looked at him carefully. Why? They're spiraling. They're spiraling because they miscalculated. They're my parents. And I'm your wife. The words weren't a threat. They were a fact. He closed his eyes for a second. They think you're controlling me. I almost laughed. Do you feel controlled? No. Then that narrative won't stick. He stared at the wall for a long moment. Then he said something I didn't expect. I think they thought the money was partly theirs. Yes, I said. And that's not normal. No. He exhaled slowly. They always did this. When I got my first job, they'd ask what I made. When I got bonuses, they'd suggest what I could contribute. I thought that was just how family works. It's not, I said softly. He nodded once, slowly. They booked it because they were sure I'd transfer the money, he said. Yes. And now they're in debt. Yes. And that's not my responsibility. No. The shift was subtle, but it was there. For the first time that night, he wasn't defending them. He was evaluating them. Then his phone rang again. His mother. He answered. What? He said. Her voice came through loud enough that I could hear it from across the room. You let her do this. There it was, blame redirected. I didn't let anyone do anything, he replied. You humiliated us in front of family. You humiliated yourselves, he said quietly. Silence on the other end. Then anger. We already committed to that suite. Do you know what it looks like if we downgrade? There it was. Image, not need. Image. He looked at me. and something in his expression hardened. "We're not covering it," he said into the phone. There was a sharp intake of breath from the other end. "You're choosing her. I'm choosing my marriage." The line went dead. And that was the first real crack. The anniversary dinner still happened. Of course it did. My mother-in-law would rather set the house on fire than admit she miscalculated. She moved the reservation to a smaller but still elegant restaurant, which everyone was informed about through the family group chat with a caption about adjusting expectations. Adjusting expectations. I almost laughed when I read it. We debated not going, but my husband said, "If we don't show up, she'll say we're hiding." He was right. So we went. The atmosphere when we walked in felt staged, too bright, too tight. People smiling just a little too much. His sister hugged him like he'd come back from war. His aunt avoided my eyes. My mother-in-law stood near the head of the table, dressed impeccably, composed, until she saw me. Her smile froze. "Oh, good," she said loudly. "You came." There it was. Performance mode. My husband squeezed my hand once under the table. We sat. Wine was poured, plates arrived, small talk floated around the table like smoke. And then she couldn't help herself. "Well," she said, raising her glass, 40 years of marriage teaches you a lot." She looked directly at us. "Mostly that you can't rely on anyone but each other." Subtle, except it wasn't subtle at all. A few relatives shifted uncomfortably. My husband's jaw tightened. I stayed quiet. She continued. "You sacrifice. You give everything to your children, and sometimes they forget." There it was. Public guilt, weaponized narrative. My husband set his glass down. "We didn't forget," he said evenly. Her eyes snapped to him. "Then why did you abandon us when we needed help?" Needed. Again. "You didn't need help," I said calmly. "You needed access." The table went silent. She blinked. "Excuse me?" "You booked something you couldn't afford," I continued, "before asking us." My father-in-law leaned forward. "That is not what happened." "It is exactly what happened," I replied. My mother-in-law's composure cracked. "We assumed family would support family." "You assumed we would pay for your image," I said. Gasps. Soft ones, but real. My husband spoke before she could explode. "You put the suite on a credit card before talking to us." That landed harder than anything I had said, because it came from him. Her face flushed. "You're humiliating me," she whispered. "No," he said. "You're trying to." Her hand trembled slightly as she set her glass down. "You let her poison you." There it was. Blame me. It's easier than admitting your child grew up. "She didn't poison anything," he said. "She protected our savings." "You locked it away like we're thieves," she snapped. "I locked it away because you assumed it was yours," I said. Her voice rose. "We raised you." "And I am grateful," he replied. "That doesn't make my wife's savings communal property." My father-in-law stood abruptly. "This is unbelievable." "Yes," I said quietly. "It is." He pointed at me. "You've changed him." I shook my head. "He's grown." The word grown seemed to hit him physically. Around the table, relatives avoided eye contact. No one was defending them now. Because here's the thing about entitlement. It looks reasonable in private. It looks ugly in public. My mother-in-law's voice cracked. "We already put money down. Do you know what it looks like to cancel a suite?" "There are consequences when you assume someone else will cover your decision," I said. "You're cold," she spat. "No," I replied softly. "I'm clear." My husband turned to her fully now. "We're not paying," he said. Final. No softness. No mediation. Her face drained of color. "So that's it?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "And if that means we downgrade or cancel, that's on us." She stared at him like she didn't recognize him. "After everything we've done." "I'm not a debt," he said quietly. That sentence, that was the turning point, because he wasn't defending me anymore. He was redefining himself. Silence fell over the table, heavy, final. My mother-in-law's lips pressed into a thin line. "If this is how it's going to be," she said slowly, "then maybe we need space." There it was, threat, withdrawal, conditional love. My husband didn't hesitate. "Okay, Her eyes widened. She expected panic. She expected backpedaling. She expected apology. She got agreement. "You'd cut us off?" she demanded. "No," he said calmly. "But if access to our money is a requirement for access to us, then yes, we need space." The room felt electric. My father-in-law muttered something under his breath and grabbed his coat. His sister stared at her plate. My mother-in-law looked at me one last time. "You'll regret this," she said. I held her gaze. "No," I replied. "You will." And for the first time in 7 years, she had nothing to say. We didn't stay for dessert. No dramatic exit, no slammed chairs. We just stood up, said goodnight to the people who would look at us differently from now on, and walked out together. The air outside felt sharp and clean. My husband didn't speak until we were halfway to the car. "She's going to tell everyone we cut them off," he said quietly. "She already is," I replied. He nodded once, but there was no panic in him anymore, no reflex to fix, just fatigue. The next morning, the fallout began. Messages, missed calls. A long email from his father about disrespect and the erosion of family values. A shorter one from his mother about how she never imagined her son would let his wife divide the family. That one didn't sting the way it used to, because something fundamental had shifted the night before. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about ownership. For years, they had treated his adulthood like an extension of their household. His income, his plans, his milestones were all viewed as shared property, not maliciously, not in their minds, but systemically. And systems don't change gently, they crack. We sat at our kitchen table that evening, the same place I'd built that vacation fund from small transfers and skipped indulgences. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "For what?" I asked. "For not seeing it sooner." That mattered more than the apology itself. He wasn't apologizing for choosing me, he was apologizing for participating in the pattern. "You didn't see it because it was normal to you," I said. "It shouldn't have been." He looked tired, not defeated, just older somehow. "They thought they could commit to that suite because I always bail them out," he said. "Yes." "I didn't realize that's what I was doing." "You were keeping the peace. At our expense?" "Yes." We didn't speak for a while after that, just sat there in the quiet of a house that finally felt ours. The next week, his mother escalated. She called his sister and told her we were financially unstable. She implied that I was controlling access to his money. She told an aunt that we were struggling and didn't want to admit it. Classic inversion. If we wouldn't fund her image, she would damage ours. But here's the thing about adulthood. Reputation matters less than boundaries. He blocked her number 3 days later. Not in anger, in clarity. He sent one final message first. "We love you, but our finances are not available for discussion or use. If that's a condition for having a relationship, we won't have one." She replied within minutes. "So you're choosing her over your own mother?" He didn't answer. He blocked. His father tried once more. "We'll forgive this if you apologize." He didn't respond to that either, and just like that, the noise stopped. No more group chat, no more passive-aggressive posts, no more innocent questions about income. Silence. It was strange at first. There's a withdrawal period when you step out of a system like that. Your body expects conflict. Your brain anticipates the next guilt bomb, but none came. Because when access is denied, entitlement loses oxygen. We didn't go to Italy, and neither did they. They downgraded their anniversary to a local dinner from what his sister eventually told him. They framed it as a more intimate celebration. No one mentioned the suite again. We didn't mention it either. 3 months later, we booked our Japan trip, non-refundable, fully paid, from the same protected account. This time, he didn't tell anyone the number. When the confirmation email came through, he looked at me and smiled in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. Not defiant. Free. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For holding the line." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. You held it too. Do I miss having in-laws? Sometimes. Do I miss the illusion of family unity? Sure. But I don't miss the quiet anxiety that followed every conversation about money. I don't miss feeling like our savings were a community project. I don't miss bracing for the next assumption. People think no contact is dramatic. It isn't. It's quiet. It's administrative. It's the removal of access. They announced they were borrowing our vacation fund. They were surprised when the money was already gone. But what really shocked them wasn't the empty account. It was the closed door. If you assume access to my plans, my savings, my future, don't be surprised when you lose access to me. And that's the last financial conversation we'll ever have with them.